All right, see, we got 14 people in, and we have more signed up, so we'll give another minute or two, let people join. We'll jump into the content. We'll go pretty quick, but we'll leave time for questions at the end. While we're waiting, if anyone wants to just throw in the chat where they're calling in from, would be cool to see regional representation today. We got Baltimore, we got Austin, Netherlands. I lived in the Netherlands for a year, loved the Netherlands, Philadelphia, Sydney. I think I missed one. Salt Lake City, fantastic. Los Angeles, Mumbai. I lived in Nijmegen. Ik gewoond in Nijmegen for 1 jaar. I was working for MSD. I'll give my whole intro in a second, but Merck in the US, MSD internationally, a pharmaceutical company. I did a year in a manufacturing site over in Boxmeer and lived in Nijmegen. It was a really great experience. Okay. We're gonna wait one more minute or get 2 more people in here, and then I'll start. All right, 19. See what happens first. All right, let's get started. So hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining. Absolutely. So thank you all for joining today. So my name's Eric. I'm a recent grad of HBS. I just graduated in May. I'm going to go through a rundown of some of the advice I would like to share on how you can write compelling MBA application essays. I'm going to save about 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. So please, if you have questions, feel free to type them out and have them ready to go, or go off mute at that time, and I'll try to rapid fire. I know this is only a 30-minute session, so I'm going to try to be as quick as possible through the content, and feel free after this to reach out off one-on-one. We can try to talk through more specific questions. But I'll give a quick background, and then I'm going to jump more into some of the specifics. So as I said, I'm Eric. I graduated from HBS this year. Before then, I grew up in New Jersey in the US. I went to Rutgers for undergrad, go Big Ten schools if we have any representation. I worked at Merck for 4 years. One of the years I lived in the Netherlands, which is why I was talking about that. And that was a really great experience. My last 2 years, I got to support our COVID program. So first with our COVID vaccine candidate, and then with our COVID antiviral drug. That experience was super interesting, a really great time to be in the pharmaceutical industry and to see a rapidly changing landscape. I leveraged that experience and some prior GMAT scores that I had taken, and I applied to HBS. I also applied to 6 other schools, so 7 schools total in the fall of 2021 during that round 1 cycle. I ended up getting into HBS in December 2021 as part of round 1, and I attended the HBS for the last 2 years. I also worked at Bain last summer as a summer associate, and I'll be going back to Bain in a little while once I start full time. So that's a little bit about my story. Happy to go into more details if it's helpful, but I'm going to focus more on the journey of applying, and we're going to focus very specifically on some of the tips that I've learned along the way as far as how to write a really good application essay, some of the things you should look out for, and maybe a bit of strategy on how you can start to write your essays and how they should come together and how you should structure them in congruence with each other. So next slide, just thinking a little bit about your school selection. There's a lot of really great MBA schools. There's US-based schools, there's international schools. There are schools that focus on very niche subjects. There's schools that are more generalist. What's good to think about, especially if you're applying right now, is really firming up that school selection list. So just on this note, real quick, it's very personal to you. And I think that it's really going to be a difficult thing to come together and kind of shore up that list. Some people apply round 1 for some schools, round 2 for other schools, but there is going to be differences in these applications. We're going to talk a little bit about that in the essay process and how you can think about how different schools are looking for different things while still kind of being authentic and true to yourself and your story, and making sure that that comes through with the schools that you apply to. The reason I have these up, it's nothing in particular. These are not the 12 best schools in the world by any means. I have no authority to rank all the schools, but this is an example of which ones are coming up as far as their application deadlines for round one. So HBS and Wharton are coming up very soon on September 4th. That's less than 3 weeks from now. So it's really crunch time to start to think about if you want to get those applications in round one. And I'm sure that many of you calling into this today are thinking about that. You see that there's a range with the last one on this list that's Sloan and September 30th. So this is a really good time for you to start to think through which are the schools that you want to apply to, how you want to stagger them, if you want to stagger them, and how you're going to prioritize writing essays for certain schools and maybe leveraging those for others. So we'll go into now deep diving into the essay process and how you can think through that. And first, the key point of essay development is that it takes a lot of time and it's about storytelling. So I think you have to really let this give a glimpse into your life and how you want to make these schools understand you as a person and not just an application on a piece of paper. Schools have different essay prompts. We're going to get into that a little bit. They're looking for different things, but what's really important here is really taking the time to dive into what you want to discuss, your personal story and your stories and how they're going to be developed over time. So we're going to talk a little bit about how, depending on the prompt, you can think through this in a few different ways, and how you can think through what ways you want to showcase that story that's going to be effective for that audience. So on the next slide, this is just a little continuum that I was thinking through, and I think it may be helpful as you think through the different types of prompts that exist. So right now, there are a wide variety of prompts that exist within the MBA applications, and this isn't saying that each of these schools is looking for something specifically as far as on this continuum, but it is showing that the prompts are going to be evoking different types of responses. So I was thinking about this through the lens of poetic versus pragmatic. So poetic means, how are you kind of bringing your best self, your emotional self into this type of environment? What is the story that you want to tell? What is the story that has brought you here and will continue to bring you beyond? This is very important in leadership, and it involves a lot of authenticity and deeper learnings about yourself and your own self-actualization. On the pragmatic side, which is very different. So like, as you see on the top, the What Matters to You Most and Why is one of the most famous essays that's out there right now. That's essay 1 or essay A for Stanford. On the other end of the spectrum is more similar to Stanford's essay B, if we're going to compare a little bit, but that we have, how do you plan to use the Wharton MBA to help you achieve your future professional goals? You might consider your past experience, short and long-term goals, and resources available at Wharton. These are obviously very, very different essay prompts that are going to be asking very different things of you. So with this pragmatic side, it's like really diving into the core of what these things mean to you, how you want to apply yourself within this, and really digging into the details that are going to help push you along and make sure that it's clear that you are prepared for this moment and that you've thought through how you're going to make this impact. So there is a range, and my first big recommendation here is that when you do an entire application for a school, you're going to want to have a little bit of each. You want to evoke the emotional side and lean into that a little bit, but you're also going to want to be very clear and concise in your goals, because that's what they're going to need to see to show that you are the right fit and you're ready for this moment. So we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the pragmatic side, and I'm going to share 3 tips for writing a good pragmatic essay. So on the pragmatic side, we're going to use that Wharton essay that I was just sharing as an example. I think what they're looking for is a mixture of ambition, specificity, and consistency. So on the ambition side, if you're asked, for example, what's your dream job, it shouldn't be simply getting promoted at your current role. You should need to think bigger than that. So what these schools are looking for are audacious goals that are showing that you are you're well primed and well positioned to tackle the problems that you think are in front of you and in front of the world that you think you're ready to take on. HBS is very famous for this, with saying that their goal is to educate leaders who want to make a difference in the world. You have to think about the difference that you want to make in the world, how you want to what is your role in that, and how you plan to get there. So a lot of this is really being audacious and saying, like, I know I can do this. Here's how I plan to do it. And here's how Wharton, HBS, Sloan, etc. is going to help me do it. These programs are very competitive. So I think that belief in yourself is going to help them believe in you. If you come across in the essays like you're unsure of yourself and you use very passive language, for example, if you say, like, after the MBA, I might want to go into this industry because it could help me achieve this goal, or it could help me break into VC, or whatever it is that to you, it sounds like you're so unsure about what your vision is that I think that they might also feel unsure about your ability to actually do it. So be very bold and ambitious without being overconfident. Figure out what those realistic but audacious goals are. On the specificity side, when you talk about the past, you have to be specific on the impact you made. Also concise, of course. So when I say specific, I mean, let's say you got the opportunity to help a nonprofit kind of prop themselves up, or you volunteered a lot of your time. And this is a really impactful moment for you because it helped you care about clean tech, or it helped you care about reducing recidivism for inmates, whatever it is that matters to you. You have to be ready to talk about that. So you have to be specific in what you did and kind of really share what that meant to you, but also make sure that it's genuine and that it's very clear to the reader of your application that what you were able to accomplish. On the future looking side, I think you also have to be very concise and very specific with why the MBA program. So there's a ton of information online about what these programs can offer. There are a lot of ways that the programs are similar, obviously. They're all master's in business administration degrees, but the schools have very different cultures. They have very different ways of educating their students. And generally speaking, there's a lot of small differences that you have to pick up on. I think it's really important to attend some of their events, to read deeply into their websites and understand why those programs are the way they are. Because when you can share your short, long-term goals, your goals for campus and beyond, you're going to need to really be specific on how that program is going to bring you there. And if you're writing an essay for your fourth choice school, it should sound just as passionate about the specifics as you would for your first choice school. Finally, on consistency, when painting a picture for your career, you want to make sure that the lines that connect everything are super clear. I think this is kind of obvious, but you don't want to share, I want to break into VC without having a clear step-by-step process on how you're going to get there. That could be utilizing campus resources, alumni. It could be a step in your career where you want to go into entrepreneurship, but then eventually get into investing. Whatever it is that makes sense to you, make sure that those lines and how you connect all the dots are super, super clear to the people that are reading your essays. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about poetic for a few minutes. I'm going to go into a little bit of a process, and then I'll hopefully answer your questions, but I will make sure I go through this kind of quickly. So on the poetic side, we're going to go back to the Stanford essay. So on the Stanford essay, the what matters to you most and why, you have to really think about authenticity, uniqueness, and soul. So with authenticity, anything that you write about is fair game. So HBS, for example, is very famous that their interviews are super, super tailored to the interviewee. When you write about something in your essays, there's a really good chance they're going to ask you about it. And it's not just an HBS thing, but a lot of schools really like to dive into the core of what you share and really try to focus on how they can kind of validate and understand the deeper meaning behind what you talked about. So whatever you write about, just know that it's fair game. It has to be authentic because you have to be ready to talk about it. And if it's not, it usually is able to be spotted by an AdCom member when it's coming off as disingenuous, or if it's caught as feeling like something that was fully fabricated. So just when in doubt, focus more on authenticity than anything else. On the uniqueness side, there's an adage that if your application is in a pile with a bunch of other applications, and they're all dropped on the ground and the names aren't on them, and an AdCom member picks up your essay and reads it and it doesn't have your name on it, they should be able to know that it's your essay because your story is so unique that it's very obvious that it's coming from you. If you read your essays and they feel like something that 50 other people may have submitted when they applied this cycle, you're not sticking out from the crowd. So I would do a little bit more work to really figure out what is the unique story that you want to say, and make sure that it's very clear that that is said without just putting your name on a piece of paper. And then finally, soul. And of course, these are all linked, but these should be very personal and core to you as an individual. You don't need to share the most traumatic thing that's ever happened to you. You don't need to share things that you're not comfortable sharing with this, like an unknown body that's reading your essays. But you should really take the time to get personal and focus on things that matter a lot to you. Things that if you had the confidence to speak in like a TED Talk or something, like what would you talk about? Really get into that tough subject that is worth telling, because that's what's going to matter more. It's going to be unique. It's going to be authentic. It's going to really share who you are behind your application. And that's going to sound a lot stronger than if you just say something generic that's missing that soul. And of course, this also means don't let ChatGPT write these for you. ChatGPT doesn't know your story, and it's not going to write things as authentically as you could. It might be able to write things better in the sense that it will avoid spelling mistakes and it will use very high vocabulary, but it's not going to be you. And there's a lot of these AI detection software that the schools are starting to use that will catch these things very easily. So my advice is to just avoid it altogether. When in doubt, just do the old Googling of a synonym for a word that you're struggling with. Right, having it rewrite your essay is a very, very risky move. One more slide before Q&A. Just want to talk really quickly about process. So a lot of you must be kind of in this 7 steps somewhere, maybe towards the bottom of this page. But real quick, if you think about it, there's 7 stages that you really need to work through. You should be brainstorming and deeply reflecting, bringing in people into the process and understanding what is it that you want to share. You have to then outline those core stories, be very clear in what the parts of this that make the most sense and how you can express them to an external audience. Then choosing that base school, drafting their essays first and making sure that you have those kind of together and you have an understanding of how you want to expand from there. You then need to look for opportunities where you may have use complicated jargon. So coming from the pharmaceutical industry, I know there's a lot of words I could have included when talking about the COVID pandemic that would not have made sense to someone who did not work in the healthcare field or did not work at a pharmaceutical company and did not understand this world as much. So it's very, very broad with what I talked about. And I think that it could make you sound like you know your industry better, but unless your audience understands your industry as much as you do, it's not worth doing. 3x revisions, make sure you focus on the core factors I talked about in the prior slides, that you're looking out for opportunities where you're sounding generic, that you're not getting the most out of yourself, and really keep that revision cycle as quick as possible so that you continue to get to your best version of yourself, your best version of your essays by the time it's time to apply. You then need to find synergies between your schools. So use that base essay, apply it. Like you can copy a little bit of what you wrote in your other essays, but don't copy all together, because as I mentioned, they're looking for specificity. If you talk about the different entrepreneurial opportunities that Stanford gives you and you're applying to Haas as well, they also offer a lot of those things, but it's different. And you really need to dive into what Haas gives you that is going to be different than Stanford. And then finally, you should be sharing your drafts with your recommenders if you have time to. Your recommenders are trying to pull out really personal stories about you. So it's really good for you to share the personal stories that you are seeing from your end, and they can hopefully pull from that information and be able to supplement your stories with their own stories of you, which are going to help paint the full picture of you as an individual. Most importantly, ask for help. Whether it's going to friends or family or colleagues or mentors or looking at professional help, this process is not something you should be doing in a silo. I will say personally, I involved a lot of people in my process. I did not hire an end-to-end admissions consultant, but I had a lot of friends that were reading my things. I had a lot of mentors that I involved in the process. I did mock interviews. It's very important, whether or not it's paid help, you should be looking for support in this process, because if you do this in a silo and you don't open this up to other people, you're going to make mistakes and you're going to miss things that are kind of obvious once you have an external view. So with that, I will open it to Q&A, and then I will share a bit about coaching. I have a, do you mind going back to one? Yeah, we can go back for 1 second. Great first question. Thanks, Will. All right. We got a question from Karen. What sort of, so yeah, if you have questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. I'll take questions for like 6 or 7 minutes, and then I'll do a closing slide and we'll wrap up. What sort of aspects do you think should be shown in a personal essay? It could be a lot of things. I've read essays that are very, very personal about something that was really difficult that a person went through, like something like the most difficult part of their childhood, or like a professional challenge or something. I think with those, it's really about showing the resiliency and showing the learnings. I think in any case, if it's something negative that happened to you or something that inspired you, focus a lot on the learnings and not just the thing that happened. Focus on the full journey of what happened. If something made you struggled with something really deeply, how did that make it easier for you to take on other challenges in your life or your career? How did you grow as a person from that experience? Not just that it happened, but what are the things that you gained from that, even if it was a negative experience, I think is very important. Do you have other questions in the chat? Or if you want to, as no one, you could also just go off mute if you'd like to shout something out real quick. Go back to this slide.
I have a question, please.
Sure, go for it.
Yeah. So, my question is more about how you can mitigate a low GPA. In the Netherlands, we don't have GPAs. We just have grades, 1 to 10. And you might not, in Holland, it's not really a big thing to get like big grades. And then how can you mitigate it? Is getting a high GRE, GMAT good enough? What is high? Because I don't even know what high is.
Yeah, and quick things on that, because I know we're not focused too much on it, but a couple quick piece of advice. When you apply to a program, there often is like a little bit of a little section where you can explain your academics or give more context to things. If you're given that opportunity, perhaps like, let's say if you had like a 7.7 out of 10, you could also share like, this was in the 90th percentile of my class, or I was like 30th out of 300 people in my class, whatever is like a good method to kind of like show how you ranked. If you can kind of like use the data in a different way, especially if it's without a non 4.0 scale, I think will be helpful. And then the second point, GPAs or GMAT, GRE scores, I would highlight one, the focus is the new thing. So the scores are going to be different if you take the GMAT focus, but look at the former class profiles of schools and you'll see usually a mid 80% range. You may see that like the middle 80% of a school gets between on the old GMAT, like a 690 and a 770. Now you know that if you're in that range, you're like typical. You don't have to meet the median. If you meet or exceed the median, that's awesome. But in that mid 80%, I think is like a safe zone. But if you're trying to compensate your GPA, you probably want to get on the higher end of that.
What would be higher end for GRE?
It depends on the school. I would feel free to send me a message after, and I'm going to try to take a couple other questions. But totally hear you. There's a lot of different stuff there. Okay, so I got a few questions. I'm going to go through these very quickly. So Sam asks, not essay specific, staggering applications, advantage to staggering versus having them all work at once. I think the main advantage is for your mental health is to stagger. It is very difficult on your time and your mental health to apply to all of these things at the same time. I applied all in round one. It was a lot of work. I don't think it's a bad idea to apply all in round one. I think there are a lot of advantages of applying round one because you have more time to kind of plan you're leaving your job, moving, especially if you're an international student and you have to figure out visas and stuff. You get a lot more time to figure everything else out. But if you just cannot, if you feel like you're going to give a less than superb application to some of these because you're rushing it, maybe stagger. Just depending on your timeline. Personal experiences I include in my essay. Sarah, feel free to send me a message. I'm not going to go into a full story. I can't go into a full story with this amount of time, but I'm happy to share the personal experience in a one-on-one call and how I kind of structured it for sure. Warden essay. How would you break down the topics? Great question. With any of these essays, when you have these topics that you need to talk about, you could do it in a few different ways. You could do it chronologically, where you're like, here's where I've been, here's what Warden means to me, here's how it's going to help me in the years that follow, here's what it means for my long-term goals. That's one way you can structure it. You could also be more like creative in the sense of like, I want to get to here and I know that from here I can't, so this is what perfect thing, and kind of say like the dreams and then the past and then how like this is going to make everything fit together. Whatever, you could do it a few different ways, but all the lines should connect, either if you say it chronologically or if it's more of a jumbled poetic fashion. Do they look at grades holistically or spending the majority of time? It's going to depend a lot, but again, yeah, it's a more specific question to different schools, but I would just expect that grades are going to be thought of pretty holistically, and then your GMAT's going to be super important with that. GMAT, GRE as well. To briefly talk about an essay that stood out to me. I'm working with a client now. I will not go into the details of his essay, but we've been working on it, and I'm really, really happy with the recent version that he's got together. It's very, very personal about a family member and what they went through, and how it inspired him to start his own nonprofit that focuses around that. And it's a really, really powerful essay. It kind of leads different elements of his life into a goal and what he wants to take with that goal going forward. If needed, again, Karen, you can reach out to me individually. I'm happy to talk about more examples than that. Gonna do one or two more last ones. Assuming your traditional overrepresented background, 94. I would say if you're not sure, if you have doubts about this is another one where it could be good to talk to someone, Will. If you're not sure if your application is ready to go, could be good to have a conversation with a mentor or a coach on whether or not, like, kind of just do a quick analysis, like, is this okay or should I wait? The 94, 98, I get the way you're going for, but I think that's very subjective. So I don't want to give a very clear answer, unfortunately. And then I think I got some thank yous. For the activities section, I think like resumes and like you fill out other things, make sure you're very clear with your how as a leader you've impacted the different spaces you've been in. I'll do one more. How do you make your essay exciting or entertaining if you don't have a sensational stories? Everyone has sensational stories. It's just figuring out the way to pull out different emotions. There are moments in your life that are emotional and exciting, and I just think you need to kind of figure out the right way to pull them out. And that's, again, one last poll for coaches/mentors who can help you see that side of it, because it may look mundane to you, but it may not actually be mundane in reality. And on that note, I know Erica has put it in the chat a few times, but also if you want to reach out and you want to have a call or you want to work through your essays with me, this is a little bit more information about my coaching. Since you attended this event, if you reach out with this code, if you forget the code name and just say, I was on your event, feel free to send me a message, and I would be happy to take 10% off any package that you book by the early of next week. And the reason it's kind of a short timeline is because round one is really coming up, and with what I'm trying to manage, I'm trying to kind of make sure that I have a clear understanding of the clients I'm working with and not take too many before I start. But I have a little bit of room to work with a few more folks. I'd love to help out those who may need the help. So if you have quick questions, feel free to send me a message over in Leland. If you want to work together, I'm happy to take a quick intro call and get to know your story a little more. And then feel free, if you want to just jump in and get work on your essays, let's do it. Let's work together. Yeah. I would be happy to work together. So yeah, send me a message. It was great getting to share some of my ideas with y'all. I wish you all the best of luck in your process. Good luck, everyone.